You're listening to Toronto's #1 real estate podcast, powered by Watson Estates. The most successful local real estate investing starts right here, right now. Here's your host, broker, investor, and social media influencer, Bradley Watson.
Good morning, investors. Bradley here from Watson Estates, and today is Sunday, September 20th, 2020. As we kind of round into that last stretch of the month, I want to look back because we've seen at least half the month behind us, so we can get some idea of what the stats are telling us will come next. What exactly is happening through September? Then we're going to start to jump into Canadian home buyers beginning to put less money down on properties, the exact opposite that CMHC has recommended as COVID began. And of course, when people are fleeing the city of Toronto, the big question is, will Toronto's culture ever recover from COVID? You're listening to the largest, fastest growing podcast for Toronto real estate on iTunes, Spotify, and Google Podcasts. I, as an investor and a broker, want to know what's going on in the news, and every so often I tell you guys through the form of a podcast. I hope you're getting a lot of value. Make sure you subscribe and hit that thumbs up. It helps with the algorithm and helps to spread this content. And let's face it, not everyone wants to know this stuff, but those investors across our city absolutely do. Fun fact, CMHC is planning on changing their names to better reflect the changing focus away from just home ownership. They say, you know what, we're focusing too much on home ownership, and the Crown Corporation wants to also highlight housing affordability. Maybe that's what these big steps have been along the way. And one of the names, it's kind of be along the lines of Housing Canada, which is just boring. I mean, clearly CMHC thinks our market is really crappy, so maybe they better get their inspiration from parallel businesses like plumbers. They can say we're #1 in the #2 business. Well, I guess by the time they figure out a name, they'll probably be #2 in the #1 business, because real estate is awesome and CMHC is really damaging their name lately. They're losing a lot of market share. But fun fact, if you guys want, in the comments below, let me know what you think would be a good name, a new name for CMHC. All right, let's get into some of the stats for the mid-month of September. A lot of this content comes from Scott Ingram, who likes to run mid-month stats, and it's great because it's looking at some of the trends that are maybe happening. Is it going to look the same as August, or is this different? Well, there's a very similar story in August as it relates to Freehold. That is ground level housing. The sales are up everywhere, with the burbs outpacing the Toronto growth. So Toronto sees a percentage change year over year for the mid-month, that's beginning of September to the 15th, of 52.8%. Still quite good. Obviously, season is a big factor because we're comparing against a September month versus the heat of COVID, making this later, kind of a later spring, as it were. But of course, it's far behind. It's actually lagging all the other big cities. We got Peel up 64, Vaughan up just under 75, Durham up 64, Halton up just under 84. And that said, that's not bad, right? 52% in Toronto, but clearly the suburbs are outperforming. Well, condo sales are up when we look at the other side, but not to the degree of the freehold. So condos are up in the 416, 21% versus the freeholds up 66%. So of course we see a lag in the condo space. There's definitely two parallel stories happening, but the total out of these areas, that is Toronto, Peel, York, Durham, and Halton, they make up 95% of TREB's totals. And Toronto has the lowest overall growth because what they say of its highest share of condo sales. So given that the condo sales are lagging, it is very natural when we look at all housing types to see Toronto in behind the pack. Again, quite substantially. Toronto is up mid-month 27.6%, but then you go to the next one, Peel's over 50, York 66, Durham 66, Halton 76, almost 77%. And again, a big factor of this being condos is such a big part of the Toronto market when we're looking at all housing types. And we're going to break it down a little bit. Now, 416 sales as a percentage is down from 38.3% for the first half of September to 32.8% from the first half this September. So the average, they say, of the range here you should find as a percentage of sales is 36 to 39% of all TREB transactions goes to the 416, the remaining, of course, being in the 905 or the outer GTE regions. But this year, or last year, was at 38, so it was at the top of that, whereas this month, the first half, it was 32.8. So we still see this discrepancy. If I were to kind of explain that, we see a discrepancy where clearly the 416 is not selling at the same pace. The suburbs are on in the long range are definitely outperforming the sales of Toronto. Well, he takes it a step further. Based on a comment that was given, they look specifically at the condo space, and one of his viewers, pointed out that between Dufferin to DVP and south of Bloor, so we're talking right downtown, those stats actually for condos, interestingly enough, are not as hard hit in the first half of September. So Toronto, again, from the condo space is getting pummeled because Toronto's condo space, the change is 11.3% year over year, Peel 17.4, York 37, Durham 88, Halton 53. So Toronto is clearly getting clobbered. But when we just focus on downtown, the CO1 and the CO8, so downtown core, they're actually changed year over year is 14.6. So fun fact, the beginning of September is seeing a lot more people who are buying condos. The performance of the ones right downtown are higher than the average condo in Toronto. Hopefully that makes sense. So the death of condos right now, it's not equal. The further from the downtown core, apparently the harder hit they were the first half of September. So it's time to hire your favorite gravedigger company. I was looking up some company names. I want to really have some fun with this. Here's if you're going to hire a gravedigger, this is the guy you want. Budget Burials. Cheaper and deeper. Meanwhile, the downtown is getting their hair did at Curl Up and Die. So condos aren't doing good anywhere, but they're obviously not created equal. And it would seem that the closer you are to the downtown core, the better you're doing in the beginning of September. Okay, so what about the detached? I saw a really interesting article came out this morning. NowToronto.com. This is the title. It caught my attention right away, as it probably would for you. Detached house prices in Toronto are still lower than peak in 2017. Why is this so fascinating? Because it would seem everything is up. Everywhere you go, prices are up. Low rise, up, definitely. Condos, maybe not, but low rise, definitely. Well, not really. Don't get caught up in this hype because all of the stats are year over year. That's comparing against 2019. But when we take it back within the last 5 years and include our 2017 pre-changes, the big changes that happened to the entire market, and really that was what single-handedly changed everything from the freehold over to the condos. During that time frame, we actually had higher detached home prices in Toronto and in other areas. So listen to this. The analysis that they had comes from Zoocasa, but they took their stats from the TREB data, and they say the average price for a Toronto house, if you don't know already, it's $1.5 million for an average detached. Not cheap. But they say it's $73,000 lower than the peak price in April 2017, or 5% less. Did you know that? It caught my eye because we often forget, yes, we're comparing year over year. Oh, things are great. Well, things were greater. The average price for detached homes in the Toronto Central area was $2.385 million in August. That figure is 5% down, or $113,000 less from the February 2017 peak. So across the city, in Toronto, and in other areas, which we'll get to in a second, we actually haven't outpaced our 2017 highs in the detached market. Now, does that mean maybe a few things? Does that mean there's a buying opportunity? So we talk about 1.5 is so high, but it's not really the top. It's not like you're buying at the top versus if you buy in some of these areas that are at the top. I mean, there you go. From an investing perspective, which one makes more sense? But I also think it points to this idea of the foreign buyers. We know 2017 was a key year in bringing down foreign ownership in our city. Maybe they're the ones that have since pulled back and has really slowed down the growth of that segment. I don't know. But back in 2017, for those of you who don't know, that's when the government tightened its rules and insurance mortgages. And one of the big things I think that affects our city is that homes over $1 million, you actually need to put 20% deposit down on them. So that makes it far less affordable. If you were to buy a $900,000 house to a $1 million, it makes a big difference, which obviously would affect the price. Now, when we look across the GTA, in certain areas, like in York, they're down 11% from their highs in 2017. King, the city of King, town of King, they fell 22% since their highs in 2016. But prices in other areas, so we got Durham reached their high. They're at 813. Halton at their high at 1.28. Brampton at their high at 986 or 989. Mississauga was up to 1.3. And detached homes in Peel as a whole was $2,000 shy of its peak, but it reached in July instead of August. Anyways, these areas are at their top. They're at their top. And there's this trend, if you haven't seen it, everyone's leaving the city and they're going to these areas. Why do you think prices are getting jacked up? That's why. That's why. Meanwhile, Toronto is still trying to catch up to their 2017 highs. I mean, we get lost in the talk that everything is their best year over year, but when you really zoom out, it tells a little bit of a different story. And does being below the historical average really mean a discount? Does it mean poor production from the city? Maybe we shouldn't invest. It really depends on you as an investor, how you look at these things. But I find it hilarious when we're comparing the condos versus the low rise segments right now. Both of these articles are from the Globe and Mail. Listen to the difference, okay? Article number 1, price cut sparks interest in corner Toronto condo. And they're talking about this one condo, 51 Trolley Crescent, unit 1309. Their previous asking price in April was $929, and they just sold for $887. And it had 53 days on market. Meanwhile, a day later, same Globe and Mail, listings delayed, but demand sparks 3 quick offers on Toronto House. 392 Rhodes Avenue, they were asking $879,900, and they sold for $1.05 million in 5 days on market. How crazy is that? That you would sit for 53 days, it takes forever, I'm dropping my price like crazy in order to sell this thing, versus, you know what, I was kind of delayed in putting it up, but I got 3 offers anyways, and it's way over asking. That's the difference. That's the difference. And which market do you want to compete with as a buyer right now? I mean, this is a terrible joke. See, I put these little jokes along the way, but now I'm reading, I'm like, I don't know. Okay, I'm going to say it. I'm going to say it because I'm here. We're talking about condos, right? Not even, again, a name. Not even Stiff Nipples air conditioning service can cool this market. That's so bad. They're talking about the Freehold, the low rise. Can't cool that one. All right, let's move along, guys. So this question of Canadian home buyers putting less money down, this comes from Better Dwelling, which you know we're in for a good show when that happens. And they talk about Canadian home buyers with small down payments grows for the first time in years. Now, again, very clickbaity title. We'll kind of talk about what they're saying here. So Canada's National Housing Agency warned home buyers with small down payments to stay out of the market. You guys probably remember that if you've hung around here for a few months. Way back when, they're like, think about it. If the market drops 5% and you get a 5% down house, you're going to wipe out your money. That was the idea. That was the logic. In fact, that might have been almost exactly what the Twitter post was coming from CMHC way back when. Well, the Bank of Canada data shows now, people did the opposite. They completely flipped. It shows insured mortgages returned to growth in Q2. This is the first time in years that insured mortgage debt has shown growth. So insured mortgage is a tricky term because it would seem like, oh, that seems more safe, insured mortgage. Well, the insured mortgage just means you have to buy the CMHC insurance because you're putting less than 20%. So it's actually the higher risk mortgages are rising. Meanwhile, uninsured mortgages, that is those with 20% or more, with larger down payments, see growth slow to a multi-year low. A flip, right? A flip. So let's look at the insured mortgage side, the ones that are putting less than 20% down. Well, insured mortgages are when lenders obtain private protection against default. The insurance is mandatory for down payment less than 20% and requires a minimum of 5%. The cost is carried by the borrower, and it roughly is 2 to 4% of the mortgage value. That's that cost. It gets tacked onto your mortgage, and you pay it over the next 25, 30 years. Well, insured mortgages are required for those with 20%, with less than 20. It means these mortgages typically, but not always, have smaller down payments. Apparently, I didn't know this, you can actually get insurance for a mortgage with more than 20% down. Fun fact. Who would do that? I guess if the lender asks for it, right? But it's pretty rare, which is why we never see it. Since you're paying an optional premium to protect your lender, it's also why you see better discounts in insured mortgage products. So if you're buying with less than 20% down, your rates are better. And that's because you're paying a premium on the other side. Hopefully that makes sense. But what about so when we look at the whole numbers, I'm just going to summarize this article. Insured, okay? So the insured, the under 20%, they are up year or quarterly 3.57%, and year over year they're up 0.07, so slightly year over year. And that's kind of the sell of this article. Well, the uninsured, I'm like, okay, well then the uninsured is down, right? Well, no. No, this is why I got to read the article. They're actually up 1.07 from the quarter, and they're up annually 11.04. Well, then I would read those numbers, I would think, well, that still sounds like far more uninsured mortgages than insured mortgages. People are taking on this risk. Well, what they're saying is they're mapping out a trend. Here's what they say. Uninsured mortgage growth outpaces insured growth, but the direction is worth noting. People with smaller down payments, the demographic CMHC warned against buying is finally growing. So the fact that there's any growth in that segment is what they're concerned about. But is there any surprise there's growth in any segment, right? Meanwhile, the demographic warned by prominent finance experts is slowing in growth. People that can't afford to lose on housing are jumping in, and people that can't afford to see prices fall are stepping back. That's the trend. So don't get caught up in the headlines, which, I mean, it's so good for clickbait, right? But realistically, we just see the gap kind of changing. A bit of a movement, if you will. People putting less than 20% down, increasing slightly year over year. Nothing too crazy, but does it really make you wonder why people are putting all this money on? Like, it's so cheap. Like, there's literally a photo. This was a Twitter post, non-inkless PW I saw, and it was replying to the Better Dwelling article. And it was a quote from the Bank of Canada. It says this: if you've got a mortgage, or if you're considering to make a major purchase, or you're a business and you're considering making an investment, you can be confident that interest rates will be low for a long time. Dude, when the Bank of Canada governor says that, what do you expect these people to do? They're going to go out and they're going to buy. I can trust the Bank of Canada, can't I? I mean, we make money so cheap, and then we wonder why people will pay through the nose for a rundown detached home. Oh, you want to sell your beater? No worries. Just go over to Wally's Private Parts and grab a used engine. Trust me, it'll sell. All right, let's do some hot topics before getting into our last little category here. And I thought this would be kind of a fun angle to it. It's like when we're looking at things, will prices go up? Will prices go down? Well, I thought, you know what, let's kind of look at that. So here's a couple reasons why prices could go up. Steve Zaretsky had a Twitter post that I thought was great. He said this: lumber prices are now up more than 170% since mid-April, adding more than $16,000 to the cost of an average single-family home. And you wonder why builders aren't cutting their price. I saw another post. I love these every so often. This comes from Neil McDonough on YouTube. Speaking as a foreign investor, Toronto reminds me of early Depeche Mode. Produced locally, admired nationally, but worshipped globally. Toronto is beyond cool. It is a double platinum greatest hits global phenomenon. You beautiful people have no idea what you have, and that is your charm and strength. Invest Toronto, no brainer. I mean, the market is hot for a reason, right? Most forecasters right now expect prices to rise through the summer. Public service announcement: don't forget to clean out your fireplaces this fall. Safety first. I hear the guys at Ashwipe have a 2-for-1 deal right now. And then why would prices go down? And we can come up with huge lists. These are just kind of headlines that I see right now that I thought would be noteworthy for you. But here's some things here's some thoughts, right? This comes from a post on Twitter from Zealand. Unpopular opinion. I don't agree with this opinion, but it's a fun thought. What if strong sales numbers this summer is not only due to deferred spring demand, but also autumn's ones pulled forward because nobody went on vacation this summer? If that theory is correct, sellers are in for a weaker seasonal demand this fall. Interesting thought, right? Maybe it's not just spring getting delayed, but it's also spring delayed plus fall brought early without the vacations. Maybe. Steve Zaretsky, another comment here: for a country so reliant on immigration, Canada's permanent resident admittance fell 63% year over year in July, and study permits down 59%. Immigration, great point. And I got another comment on YouTube. Just got off the phone from an insider friend at Citi. They're looking at 40% default rate as of today. Numbers from the VP of Mortgage Department, 33-year veteran in banking. The whole idea of defaulting. Now, don't go any further if you want to know the risk of default. And I had in my opinion, the best podcast interview that I've had since starting this podcast, hands down. And it's because I learned a lot, and it's so thought-provoking. So if you get a chance to listen to our podcast interview this Wednesday, please do. Talking about power of sales, it'll really open your eyes to what kind of risks our market faces in the power of sales space in the coming months. Also, John Pasalis posted, they kind of shared this Globe and Mail article, how crushing households and business debt is pushing, and it's pretty much talking about, here are some of the big quotes. Small business bankruptcies will surge when the fiscal cushion provided by deferrals and subsidies disappear. In many cases, the arithmetic is already clear. The business owner knows they're dead. They just haven't had the funeral yet. In other words, businesses are struggling, right? They've been getting cushioned with deferrals, and they are struggling. There are many who think we're blindly, instead of taking off and, rising in the air like a fireplace, many of us think we're actually just walking blindly towards an open Bloor Street sewer. At this point, nobody can save us from such a crappy experience. This looks like a job for Manhole Adjusting Inc. Don't miss this week's podcast, though, guys. If you get a chance, make sure you go and listen to that. I think you guys are going to love it. and it's good. It's fun. I learned some stuff, so I know you will too. All right, Blog TO. We've got an article. We're going to move on to some of our other hot topics. If you didn't know, it feels like just yesterday, Toronto, Peel, Ottawa, everyone closed, right? You're not allowed to they limited social gatherings. Well, one day later, it applies to the entire province. More than 2/3 of cases apparently are for people under the age of 40. So it's young people, specifically individuals between 20 and 39, now make the majority of all COVID cases diagnosed in Ontario. As a result, the limits are rolled back across the entire province. Crazy how fast that news happened, huh? Or when we look at Toronto's path, I saw an article from the Globe and Mail. This is so interesting. Toronto's path is a dead zone, even as some workers trickle back to office buildings. So fascinating the way that they've mapped out the subway stations. If you look at it, they've got King, Osgoode, Union, St. Andrews, and Queen. They range from as low as 6,000 at Osgoode. This is in March, right? This is ridership, passenger count, exits. And all the way up to St. Andrews, which is just over 16,000. Those numbers are every station consistently under 2,000. It looks like a roller coaster ride. Right? We'll call it the path. Maybe people just want fresh air though. You know, I mean, maybe it's not, maybe it has nothing to do with that. Maybe it's just people, going for nice little walks, pick up their COVID dogs and prefer the wind in their hair as they drive or walk over to Doggy Styles, get their dog hair permed. Dude, we got to be careful with the amount of, it's so interesting. It's so fascinating. And anybody who would take transit can see that. You would see that for sure. All right. We did mention this in the past podcast, but I thought, you know what? We haven't talked about it in a while. This idea of the rent freezes, residential rent freezes. Just a reminder, if you didn't already know, the Ontario government has introduced the Helping Tenants and Small Business Act, and that they passed to freeze rent in 2021 if it's passed. And it is for most rent-controlled and non-rent controlled residential units. And part of that too was that they were going to change the Commercial Tenancies Act to extend the temporary ban on evictions for commercial tenants. So yes, even though now you can evict residential tenants, did you know commercial businesses are still in that boat? The ban initially was until August 31st, and it was to be in line with the Canada Emergency Commercial Rent Assistance Program, CECRA, which is a joke and nobody cares about anyways, but they're going to continue it. It's going to keep going on. And the businesses that didn't apply before, because why would they, can apply again if they choose to now. Maybe they get a change of heart. Could the government bring in residential eviction freeze again? Is that possible? Absolutely possible. It's unlikely at this point, but it's possible, right? So if you guys have those pesky tenants right now, get them out while you still can, with those good old-fashioned rent evictions. Sounds like a job for pain in the glass. Sorry, I got to do the windows and doors. All right. Not COVID, I swear. Moving on. Toronto may never recover from COVID-19. Our last and final topic. I thought this was good. We get a lot of hard facts, but let's get some touchy-feely here. Coming from a guy that's coughing with COVID. Let's get some touchy-feely. Right? So this comes from an opinion piece, and the question was, is Toronto going to ever recover? This is the big debate, and it sounds touchy-feely, but really it will mean real money, real growth, depending on which side is right. Will people come back to Toronto, or is it done? The culture of Toronto is dead. Well, here's some of the highlights from this article. Depending on whom you talk to, the pandemic and the ensuing economic meltdown have been either the best thing to happen to people or the worst thing ever. Admittedly, I isolated up north in the wilderness with my fiance for almost 4 months. The Toronto I came back to was not the one I'd left. The once crowded, high-action streets were quiet and empty. A brand new tent city had popped up in the outskirts of Trinity Bellwoods Park. Aside from the luxury shopping and dining spots in the Tonnier parts of the city, stores and restaurants were sparsely populated. Toronto, the Canadian city on the cusp of becoming world-class, has changed. Did it? Has it? This should be no surprise. The economic fallout has had wide and far-reaching impacts on all aspects of the economy. What made this city so vibrant has been stripped away, and a comeback does not appear to be happening anytime soon. Interesting, guys, right? Well, the Canadian Tourism Commission, now known as Destination Canada, they estimate that we saw a decline of 99%. That is 770,000 hospitality jobs have been lost. 99% dropped, overnight arrivals dropped. Crazy. And the industry's normal revenue has incurred ongoing losses of 80 to 90%. So tourism, hospitality, and sports, they're dead, right? We don't have the Raptors. I mean, they're not in anyways, but you remember the vibe of the city. Where'd it go? With the swift adoption of telecommuting, many office workers are now considering moves outside the GTA where the cost of living is cheaper and the pace of life is more relaxed. I mean, we entered stage 3 cautiously and we're starting to see things pull back. If there's no longer any pressure to schmooze and put in FaceTime downtown and at business parks across the Golden Horseshoe, then why continue to pay exorbitant mortgages and or cram yourself and your family into shoebox condos in the core in order to maintain a reasonable commuting time? Why? I love this last paragraph she has. The career opportunities, social life, restaurants, sporting events, and cultural cachet are what made Toronto, well, Toronto. Without the opportunities, the shiny attractions, and the requirement to live within a reasonable commuting distance of work, people may be less willing to tolerate the sky-high housing prices and rents, traffic, population, noise, and family-unfriendly condo lifestyle. Unless all levels of government work together to revive old industries, create new ones, and sustainably invest in the health of Canada's largest city, the allure of the big smoke may disappear into thin air. What do you think, guys? What do you think? What an interesting opinion piece, right? Will Toronto rise again? If you ask investors, which we did, we had that talk a few days back about the panel and what they had to say, the experts, and they generally agree the city is going to rise again. But if you ask the average Joe, which is what I get out of this opinion piece, no, right? Joe's over here and he's like, I want change. His house, he wants a new house. His job, get a new job. His marriage, wants out of that. Oh, his marriage, oof. Time to call up the top lawyer in the area. Ditch her quick and hide, divorce lawyers. So, guys, whatever you think is going to happen here, make your investments accordingly. Do you think people will come back to the city? If so, you're in company with a lot of investors. You're not in a lot of company with just the average Joe. They seem to be wanting to run away. Keep in mind, all of these things are shut off, right? We got immigration completely halted. Like, who's coming here for school, right? We've got overflow coming from leases, from rentals. There's so many reasons why our condo space would be taking a hit right now that in 2 years, I think that's conservative enough. In 2 years, you don't think it'll come back? I don't know. I do, but we'll see. In the meantime, if you think of any great suggestions to share with CMHC for a name change, leave them in the comments below. I'll see what I can do. Hey, Evan, guess what? I got 5 comments. Check it out, dude. All right, I'll see you guys next time. I hope you have a fantastic week. Take care and keep it real.